and welcome to Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. I'm Chloe Cho. With the new year, so many of us desire change. Change for the better. The process of transformation involves change at the core of our being, change that is implemented in all aspects, be it physical, psychological, mental, emotional, and/or spiritual. The process is rarely swift, but rather a long, winding journey that allows us to examine who we are and what we're made of. After a close brush with death left me unwell and traumatized as a teen, my transition and recovery process were far from what I had expected and certainly not as portrayed in the movies. I somehow expected an instant miracle as in TV dramas where the story cuts to a different scene and everything seems perfect. But the reality played out very differently as I learned the hard way. After a dramatic tumble atop a snowy cliff at a ski resort over the Christmas holiday break, I suffered a brain concussion and underwent surgery to remove blood clots while enduring a whole host of issues, including a heavily injured forehead, a fractured tailbone, as well as left arm and leg that had lost much of their sensation due to extreme frostbite and hypothermia. I lost a lot of weight during the ordeal, which I counted as among the very few positive outcomes, but the weight loss proved only temporary. Once I started eating whole foods upon returning home from hospital after relying on an IV tube for a few weeks, I began putting on weight precipitously to the extent that I fear that even looking at a glass of water would add another few pounds. This is really a key lesson that shows how fasting can be the worst thing that we can do to our bodies. The weight that I had lost during and after surgery came back with a vengeance. It was as if I had lost complete control over my body, which transformed into a beast of its own. I was clueless as to how to regain control of my own body and fell into despair as it expanded day after day. I was young, ignorant, and incapable of facing a world that continued to unleash one challenge after another. I often looked up at the sky and asked, why couldn't my life just be normal like everybody else? What on earth have I done so wrong to deserve this? As fear and insecurity became my best friends, I sought refuge and comfort in food as my body continued to expand. I hated myself, yet felt increasingly and strangely comfortable in having an extra layer to shield me from further setbacks in life. I limped to school with a cane and wore an ill-fitting wig. I was bullied and ostracized. My so-called friends were nowhere to be found. Just when I thought I was slowly getting my life back on track, I learned that the reality can be far from a fairy tale and there are no quick fixes in life. Less than a year after I had survived a coma following that terrible accident at the Mammoth Ski Resort in California, a fanatic driver heading to a rock concert slammed into my mother's car near our house around Westwood, Los Angeles. I was sitting next to her in the front passenger seat upon returning from my weekly cello lesson. As fate would have it, I had unfastened my seatbelt a few seconds before the collision because we were just a couple of blocks away from home. The impact of the accident lifted my body and slammed my head into the car's windshield. And what do you know? I was back in hospital for physiotherapy for about several months. The future at the time offered nothing but darkness. I feared that I was doomed for a mediocre life and struggled to find my place. I wondered whether the string of bad luck would continue and doubted whether I would even live past the age of 20. As I grieved, I perceived myself as an underperformer or even downright failure. It's no surprise that I turned to food for comfort and struggled with weight as well as my body image and self-esteem for years. I recall having a brief, miraculous stint on television a year or so after the devastating accidents, but as time passed, the glamorous world of television seemed like a galaxy away from where I was in life. I yearned for another miracle, but the chances seemed remote. As my body image became further distant from what I had considered as the ideal from fashion magazines and television ads, I became increasingly pessimistic and defeatist. In the face of physical and psychological adversity, I often became resentful and doubtful. At one point, I was convinced that my life was cursed, therefore wanted to shut myself out. It wasn't until years later that I made peace with my demons after undergoing much soul-searching to seek answers on why my life was the way it was. It was during these moments of tears that I was born again as Christian and realized that my struggles and hardships served a purpose in helping me brave the harsh winds called reality. Whenever I stumbled, I simply got up, wiped my slate clean, and started all over again. In the midst of despair and darkness, I built up the courage to dream about something that seemed so remote from my circumstances, to pursue a career in the world of television. My early attempts were far from glamorous. I worked around the clock from the moment I entered university. I didn't have much of a life and didn't have the slightest care for how much I earned. My body ached from exhaustion and fatigue, but I was happy to be honing my skills for a craft that would eventually give me wings to a new life. It's this conviction and drive that kept me sane during my toughest moments. In my early years, I often found solace whenever I had a chance to catch the sunset along the beautiful Han River in Seoul during long subway rides. The brilliant sun floating against the horizons represented the expansive and unknown world that was waiting to sweep me off my feet. I would close my eyes and visualize the world out there, from Asia to Europe and across the Americas, before I would find myself amongst the throngs of commuters in the subway underground. Hope and passion kept me going from one marathon after another, no matter how brutal, unjust, and heartless the world seemed every now and then. I recall one particular image of myself in my teens when I came home from school. I was feeling extremely bloated and sweating profusely. It was early summer and I was out of breath. I felt heavy. My huge breasts weighed down the entire body, giving me backaches. They were probably D cup or even double D. My breasts grew out of proportion, possibly due to a combination of weight gain, long sedentary hours, lack of exercise, and likely a hormonal imbalance from what I suspect was due to a cocktail of drugs that had been administered to me during my time in hospital and their after effects or side effects. I perceived myself as a strange, monstrous beast as each breast was about the size of my face. When it came to clothes, my choices were limited to big, boxy shirts, leaving my relatively small waist vanishing beneath. My face stuck out like a small fruit on a stocky tree. I hated myself for not being able to fit into more petite and pretty clothes, and wondered why my life could not go back to the normal I had known before my accidents shattered my normalcy. I resented boys and men for staring at my boobs and making jokes of them. Sometimes even the teachers at school. Couldn't they have any decency? I couldn't comprehend the looks of lust that I encountered on the street. I sometimes bandaged my breasts to conceal them, but that did not do the trick. I enviously stared at slender and more beautiful girls at school and longed to be like them. I would often glance through women's magazines, pore over every single article related to breast reductions, and I seriously contemplated going under the knife, if only I had the financial freedom. During these years, I often rushed home from school to rest my breasts on the desk, as their weight was unbearable after a long day. It was often painful to remove my bra as the heavy wires abraded the skin under the breasts, leaving scars or bloodstains. The bras were specially purchased from the United States to fit big-chested women like me, yet I was only a young teen. In the rare event that I somehow found bras for a C+ cup, they were made for pregnant or maternity women, so did not fit me properly. Back then, it seemed inconceivable that an Asian woman could be large-chested. Forget about Pamela Anderson and the positive images conveyed of buxom women on television. Based on what I have experienced in real life, carrying such weight is most definitely not sexy. I tried dieting about 1,000,000 times. I fasted, experimented in becoming vegetarian, juiced everything, skipped breakfast or lunch, then didn't eat after 6 p.m. and tested whatever fads and methods were out there. Some were more effective than others, but ultimately none were able to keep the weight off on a long-term basis or create the silhouette that I so desired. Most importantly, I would lose weight in unintended areas such as my face or arms, and not in the areas that needed help. Ironic as it may sound, my weight never topped the scales at 70 or 80 kilos, but rather reached a meager 61 or 62 kilos at its heaviest, but I appeared much heavier due to my small bone frame, odd body shape, and bloated look. I was simply out of shape and cringed whenever anybody tried to console me that I had a nice face. I did not understand how anybody could perceive any beauty in my swollen face, whose double eyelids had all but disappeared in the puffiness. The weight issue became ever more challenging as I entered the world of television where gorgeous and svelte women abound. Much of dieting, I have learned, is about the mind. After several years of feeling down and humiliated, the weight finally started coming off into my 20s as I began better understanding my body type. While I had more or less resigned to what I had thought was my fate as a self-perceived fat girl, I did not give up. I continued to exercise at the gym, pool, and wherever else to burn off the calories and keep my heart rate up. I sometimes ran, swam, and sweated on stepping machines prior to signing myself up at slimming centers where the machines were supposed to exercise my body on my behalf. I also went as far as hiring a personal trainer. But none of it was a panacea. To be fair, it wasn't a lost effort as I discovered whatever muscles lurked underneath my biceps, triceps, and beyond. Deep down inside, I sensed that something was missing and that I hadn't yet cracked the code in figuring out what worked for me. No matter how hard I tried, my body shape remained more or less out of shape. As I strove to find a healthier me, I was puzzled to see people who could eat whatever they wanted and still maintain a fantastic shape, while others like me were slaves to their food yet remained ever far from achieving their desired shape. As I persisted, researched, and experimented with my body, I gradually began cracking the secret code. When I was a senior in university, I had had enough. After so many attempts at dieting and suffering from the yo-yo phenomenon, I broke free. After a miserable try at becoming vegetarian, I decided to set myself free. Being a carnivore at heart, it was impossible to deny the meats that I loved with every bite, whether baked, barbecued, boiled, cured, fried, grilled, roasted, or steamed. My love for meat was such that I sensed withdrawal symptoms like a nicotine addict when I did not enjoy at least a morsel per day. Instead of admitting utter failure at not being able to transform into a vegetarian, I decided that it was downright wrong to deny the things that I loved entirely. Surprisingly, it was only when I decided to set myself free from various restrictions of what I could or couldn't eat that the weight slowly started coming off. After much reflection and observation over the ties between food and human psychology, mine in particular, I concluded that whenever I am denied something, I compensate for the deficit by binging on something else. In the end, I gained more weight as I bulked up on empty calories via crackers, cookies, chips, juices, drinks, or whatever else was within my reach. This understanding was critical in helping me eventually shed the excess pounds. Is it possible to eat everything you want and still maintain a shapely figure? Yes and no. I subscribe to the notion that you are what you eat, but I've come to believe that people are born with different body types, therefore can't and shouldn't rely on a one-size-fits-all solution to lose weight or restore health. My belief is based on observations and understanding of how my body has reacted over the years through trauma and recovery, along with what I gathered through numerous interviews with medical, health, dietary professionals and specialists on the job. Many years ago, when I was working on a series of reports on traditional Korean medicine, I had an epiphany. I chanced upon something called the Sasang philosophy that was developed towards the end of the 19th century by Korean physician Lee Jae-ma. Under the so-called Sasang theory, Lee delineates the human body constitution into 4 groups based on the strength or weakness of a person's yin and yang. Taeyang, or greater yang, Taeum, greater yin, Soyang, lesser yin, or Soum, lesser yang. Each group has a particular body shape and characteristic in terms of food preferences and foods that don't agree with their biochemistry and digestion. The theory offers research and specific examples of limitations patients face when given the same treatments to address their maladies and health disorders due to their divergent makeup. This meant that while a certain method might work on one group, it would not necessarily be the case for other groups. The Sasang theory differs sharply from traditional Korean or Chinese medicine, as it denotes each body type as requiring tailored methods for treatments and illnesses and disorders. The concept has similarities with India's alternative medicine, Ayurveda, as they both define the human body as being classified in different groups. Just as I was categorized somewhere between Vata, or wind, and Pitta, or fire in Ayurvedic medicine, Sasang also perceives that body types that don't fit into the standardized classification fall somewhere between 2 groups. These alternative methods have helped me in dealing with the imbalances in my body and health over the years, especially in later years due to stress and anxiety upon being threatened with a lawsuit by a former employer who accused me of breaking a non-compete clause for moving to another TV network. The incident triggered a bout of rashes all over my body. My Ayurvedic treatment consisted of taking some medicated herbal potions morning and night, as well as receiving heated oil massages. One feels a strange and soothing sensation as you lie on a wooden massage bed or droni with a thin blanket draped over your body as medicated herbal buttermilk drips over your so-called third eye. According to Hinduism, the third eye is located around the middle of the forehead, slightly above the eyebrows, and closely associated with the pineal gland that French philosopher René Descartes called the seat of the soul, where the mind and body meet. Drip after drip, as the earthen vessel hanging above released its mysterious potion, drenching my forehead and soaking my hair. I felt strangely calm and cool as the inflammatory waves raging through my nerves ebbed slowly away. My conscience floated somewhere between reality and a dream state as I pondered the supposed curious and mystical powers of Takradara. Takra meaning buttermilk, and Dara, or pouring, is often touted as the most divine and ancient Ayurvedic ritual, dating back more than 2,000 years in India. As I embarked on a journey to better understand my body, I also began looking back to my childhood years for clues on what I craved and spurned from a young age. This made sense. After all, how can you explain why an infant likes and dislikes certain foods? Do early cravings signal the kind of food that a person is better able to digest and metabolize? I was curious. From as young as I could remember, I was known for being a carnivore. I loved meats and disliked sweets. I only learned to enjoy chocolates, candies, cookies, and other sweets in my early teens as I strove to be like other children. Did my early preferences suggest that my body could possibly have more capacity to absorb meat and less ability to take sugar? Did such tendencies suggest that sugary food did not agree with me? It was increasingly making sense that there was so much we did not understand about food harmony. Perhaps the key takeaway is that people react differently to food due to differences in biochemistry, metabolism, digestion, and hormonal balance, while some outgrow food allergies or see their body types change due to their environment, habits, and lifestyles. Does this mean that if we tweak our daily diet, we can satisfy not only our cravings, but also restore our balance? As many questions emerged, I decided to give an interesting experiment a try. First and foremost, I stopped counting calories and weighing myself. Whenever I had cravings for certain food, instead of suppressing them, I decided to listen to what my body was telling me rather than letting my reason get in the way. For example, if in the mood for some cheese, previously I would try to resist that urge. But was it possible that by repressing this craving, I might be inadvertently denying certain nutrients that my body was lacking and thus demanding? Once I began paying closer attention to my body's signals and addressing those needs, I had fewer incidences of severe cravings that led to binge eating and other eating disorders. As I listened to what my body was telling me, I stopped considering food cravings and stomach growls as weaknesses, but rather recognized them as signals of what my body needed. The more I became mindful of what my body was telling me, the lesser I experienced weight issues. And as I got used to this new mindset, I gradually began replacing my cravings with healthier options. For example, if I craved fried chicken, I would opt for roasted chicken. If I wanted French fries, I would try to go for oven-baked fries. The more I explored healthier options, the more I was able to enjoy my food. But before I could declare food independence, there was an unresolved issue. While Ayurveda had cured most of my skin inflammation, I still suffered from a recurrence of minor rashes from time to time. Were the symptoms related to my food intake? What was I doing wrong? I suspected that I had yet to resolve what could be the final piece of my jigsaw puzzle. In the quest for health wellness, I opted for the next step in understanding my body composition, a comprehensive food allergy blood test. Little did I know that there would be such a vast variety of options to choose from. It was puzzling to know which one to select given the wide-ranging price points from a couple $100s to several $1,000s. Upon heeding the advice of my general practitioner, I underwent a thorough examination of more than 1,000 food items, encompassing not only the major food groups such as grains, meats, dairy, fruit, and vegetables, but also nuts, spices, seasonings, and even food colorings. And the results were quite a surprise. Who would have ever imagined that my number one allergy was yeast? Brewer's yeast used in beer and baker's yeast to make bread, to be precise. My other allergies included shrimp, duck, and yogurt. As I digested the findings, it struck me that some of it made sense and again boiled down to whether I was listening to the signals being sent out by my body or not. There were plenty of examples to chew on. For example, when I was about 16 or 17, I recalled developing a strong dislike of shrimp for reasons I did not understand, so gradually began avoiding them. Just as a similar trend happened with duck meat. I didn't bother exploring why I had developed inexplicable negative reactions to either shrimp or duck meat, but just weaned them off from my diet. My recollections made me believe that changes were occurring in my body as I grew older, and my body was sending out signals which I now heeded. However, was my body giving me the message when it came to yeast? Yes, and also no. When I tasted beer for the first time in my teens, I disliked it and knew that something was not right. Therefore, I missed out on social drinking in university as most students were busy downing beer. While I managed to avoid brewer's yeast, the fact that I continued to consume baker's yeast used in bread probably complicated my digestion over the years. Did my allergies explain why I frequently felt bloated and constipated? Was it possible for me to have detected the trait without undergoing a blood test? After all, how can anybody possibly know that you're allergic to bread of all things? This was the biggest aha moment in my quest to understand food harmony. My aha moment answers so many questions that I had over so many years and prompted me to reevaluate what I eat on a daily basis. Upon realizing that I was making the wrong food choices for my body type, I replaced yogurt with oatmeal and bananas and other types of fruit for breakfast and cut down my bread intake by swapping sandwiches with wraps for lunch, and would only have bread sparingly whenever I dined out. I wasn't denying myself the food that I love, but just managing my allergies so as to avoid the daily repetition. The result was gradual, but life-changing. With time, I saw noticeable changes in my digestion, skin complexion, and even dress size. Over the many years, I shrank from US size 6 to 8 at my heaviest to my current size 2. Also, whatever happened to my double D breasts? They have also managed to slim down with weight reduction. Did I undergo a breast reduction? No. Life is full of surprises and irony. What life takes away, it also gives back. Much of my seemingly pointless daydreams eventually became a reality before I knew it. Never did I expect to glance into the eyes of top German supermodel Claudia Schiffer over lunch, probe questions on international terrorism to former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani post-September 11th attacks, or find myself having breakfast next to the former U.S. Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin at a regional conference. I'll also never forget a rather peculiar handshake with the then chief of the International Monetary Fund, Dominic Strauss-Kahn, about a year before he got embroiled in a sex scandal involving a New York hotel chambermaid, as I was rushing into an interview with the woman who would replace him and become one of the world's most powerful leaders, Christine Lagarde. As unpredictable and precarious as our lives can be, much of what happens to us is not dictated by fate or destiny. As Goethe once said, "Dream no small dreams, for they have no power to move the hearts of men. Think big. If you love what you do, you aren't wasting your time, and you won't regret later." My story revolves around hard work, dedication, struggle, and sacrifice for a passion that I've nurtured since I was a child. My work is far from over, and I believe that I'm still learning and aspiring to seek meaning from a career that has represented who I am and what I'm made of. Having experienced much physical and psychological turbulence, I will never forget one particular sunny afternoon. I was sitting alone on the bleachers in school while observing other kids playing on a grassy football field. The warm sun shined on me, as if to tell me that life was going to be okay. The ray of light somehow gave me the courage to get up, put my cane aside, and wipe away my tears. I vowed that I would never look back and march forward. Many years have passed since that small limping weak girl shed a tear in school. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders and worried about how I would weather the harsh blows that would come my way. Having had this bizarre experience at a young age, if there's one thing I would have done differently, I think I would have tackled my challenges head-on with less fear and anxiety. There's always that bittersweet feeling with the benefit of hindsight. Life is a roller coaster, and its unexpected twists and turns actually make the journey all the more interesting and exciting. It makes every sense to dream and chase after it. What you're dreaming for might seem like another world today, but it can be ours tomorrow, and I'm a living testament of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this rather personal account as extracted from my book titled Good Morning Singapore, This is Chloe, which was published in Korea a few years ago. With the 18 weekly episodes so far, Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers will be taking a month-long seasonal break. We'll be back, refreshed and recharged next month with a dynamic and inspirational lineup for Season 2. Do stay tuned and continue to support us. If you're on social media, feel free to reach out and share what you think of the podcast. To all the great dreamers out there, I'm Chloe Cho. Take care and see you soon.